we good to go?
We're good to go.
Excellent. All right. This is going to be our last week of computer-related shenanigans, and sadness. What I'm going to do is talk for a little while about how some internet-related things work, but there's no homework associated with that. So the time afterwards, we're going to eat up for working on the projects for anybody that's still working on their projects, or any other topics and rabbit holes about computers that you want to suck me into. And then actually said a thing in Slack about calling people for what we're taking the next week.
That's right. It's a good question for, is next week a break week, or do we want to rush right into wet and squishy things with Julia? And I think it is only a couple of people have weighed in, but there is a unanimity across those people, which is to take a break. But feel free to weigh in however you like. We do the next, and this is not to, pull attention away from making the internet, but the next one is all about resin and casting and molds and wet stuff. And then we're going to also check your own DNA in a weird, very specific, not useful way.
It's the only kind of way I do it.
Yeah. It's great. And so that's where we're headed next. But the main question is, do we take a break or do we rush right in?
Right. Let's take breaks so I could work on my cool little thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's great. You just vote. Little dancing blob or the rocket if we blast ahead.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna be the dancing blob.
I'm 100% blob.
Yes. Blob.
Okay.
Okay. So that's happening in Slack, and let's do computers.
Okay.
Give me some Slack or something. So, we're gonna talk about the general structure of how internet things work, and that's gonna consist of the thing we call the front end of the internet and the back end of the internet. And roughly what that ends up being is that the front end is the stuff that happens on your computer when you're looking at the internet, and back end stuff that happens somewhere up in the cloud, and we'll talk a little bit about that in detail. So the general shape of things, of internet things, is that your computer goes off and talks to some computer somewhere in the cloud, and gets some content from it, and then it shows that content to you. And this content, you think of it as being like a web page or an app or whatever it is that you have on your computer, but if you start digging into the details, which we'll roll into a minute, you'll see that it's made up of pieces that are called the elements of the document. And then the way that your computer gets those is that it sends some stuff it sends a request over the network to something in the cloud saying this is the thing that I'm looking for, and that thing in the cloud comes back and says here's the stuff that you're looking for. Yes.
What is a cloud? I always hear it, but I don't understand what a cloud is. I mean, besides that.
No, roughly think about it as all the computers that are not in people's homes, that are in some way collaboratively constructing the experience that you have when you go on the internet. So
those huge rooms or those big.
Yes.
Yeah, it's that, and 50% of those roughly are owned by Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take.
And like all of our Amazon shopping is just like the side business of their web server business.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And you are actually able to see some of this communication that's happening between the front end stuff that's on your computer and the back end stuff that's in the cloud, and we'll look in that in a minute. And then the other side of it, what's happening in the cloud, is usually not really visible to you because that is behind a security wall, etc. But if you're making your own thing in the cloud, then you do have some tools to be able to see what is happening on that thing of yours. And so we'll do a demo of that later as well. Hello, person.
Yeah.
Give me a slide.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, keep going.
So we'll focus on front end first, which is the web inspector.
Yeah. So what ends up happening here is that when we have a window here that's looking at the MakeHaven page.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna pull this up as a demo on my computer in a second.
Yeah, you sure can. I was just gonna bloop.
Yeah.
Same exact thing.
Sure. Pull up MakeHaven. And so what happens here is that Corey's pulling up MakeHaven, and Corey's computer is going to download some stuff from MakeHaven in the cloud, wherever that is. And then we're gonna turn on this thing that we have inside the web browser that is called a various things, and we call the browser inspector,
Yep.
developer tools. And inside that, here, give me the elements tab for now. So what we see now is that on the left is the content that we see normally, and then on the right is a hierarchical structure of how the computer sees that content. So for example, can you find me these buttons
Sure.
somewhere in that tree?
So like, here's the
Yeah.
join now button,
Yeah.
and here's the block of buttons.
Yeah. So you can see that there's sort of like more structure and more metadata about all of this. But that structure gets turned by your computer. So your computer gets this from somewhere on the internet, and then your computer turns that into this visual presentation. And to do that, it uses two different parts. It uses this hierarchy of elements that describes the hierarchy of sort of the structure of this content. But that hierarchy doesn't really have any styles associated with it. It doesn't have any information about like what fonts are we using, like what size of like letters we have. There is a different thing that your computer gets as part of getting this from the internet, which is all the style information. So what Corey is showing right now is that this element that we're looking at, which is this button that says join now, has all of these styles associated with it. So it has things like background color is red. It has like a solid border around it of like this pink color. Ooh, yes.
You can mess with them.
And you can mess with them. Now, when you're messing with them, because you're messing with what your computer retrieved from the internet, you're not doing anything that would affect somebody else. And if you ever have any kind of like a browser extension that's doing something like ad blocking or something like that, that is what it does. It looks at this hierarchy and it looks at the styles, and then it modifies them before it shows them to you in some way. Yeah, so let's questions about any of that. Great.
A common reason that I actually use this
Yeah.
is if I go to Tinkercad, which I do have pulled up on nope, wrong. Oh, it's on here. Tinkercad is in this tab. When I go to pull screenshots for Tinkercad, because I put them onto slides with perfectly white backgrounds, I go in, and this is a light gray background, which is almost imperceptible, but you definitely notice it on a white slide. So I go in and use that inspector and alter the color of that background, so that when I take a snapshot, it's a white background and it blends nicely into the slide.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Love that.
Great.
I appreciate your attention to.
Thanks.
So when your computer gets all of this stuff from somewhere on the internet, it puts together this content structure and the style information, and it uses that to show things. Now, to get that to your computer, let's do the network piece, cool. To get that to your computer, what happens is that there is something that goes over, in this case, like Wi-Fi out to the internet and then comes back. And that's something that goes out is called a network request, in which your computer says, I'm looking for this. And then something on the internet comes back and says, okay, I have it for you. And that stuff that comes back is called a network response. And so if you go to the same part of your web browser where you can look under the hood of what your computer is doing, there is a section called network, in which you can see these things going by. So Corey's going to reload the page, and now a whole bunch of stuff happens. And what you can see is that, let's see, let's narrow this down just to images for a minute. So to show us this page, you needed to download like 20 images of various kinds. There's like the picture, there is this background, there is I think if you
I can pitch all of that about the individual things.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
There's like
social media buttons down
social
here.
media buttons that are down at the bottom of the page.
This is like the big hero shot. That's the background there. This is the MakeHaven logo. And so yeah, but all these things come flying in. It's even if we go to YouTube. If I can spell anything, just takes longer because there's more stuff being loaded.
YouTube.
Yeah, I spelled whatever. Do. Control Shift I. And if we reload this page, you can see how long YouTube's taking to load. All of that is visible in the network traffic. So if I reload this, this is still probably from the original load.
It's just showing you the images.
Yeah. So this, if we go to all, here's all of this coming in from YouTube. And so the same rough time frame, but it hasn't loaded any of the photos for the actual pictures on the videos. So we're up to like 9 seconds for this page to load. And it's still working on it. Yeah.
So anyways, and so I can take me back to MakeHaven.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so there's a few other things that are happening here. If you give me the CSS for a second, CSS is the CS stands for what is it?
Gating style sheets. Yeah.
So that's the style information for this page. So you downloaded like 20 style files that it's using to figure out where it's going to put things on the page and what size the fonts are going to be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of this content that gets retrieved from the internet, your computer turns into showing stuff on your screen. One other thing that I wanted to do, take me back to the slides for a second, just start to make sure that I know where I'm at in this. What is next? Great. All right. So let's talk about one more thing before we jump into this. Take me to. I guess we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Do demoing things.
No problem.
Go to a website called pixabay.com. Pixabay. It's just an image search and pull up the network inspector. And then start typing in the search field. And as Corey is, and turn on all requests in your network. Okay. So what you're going to see is that as Corey is typing in here, Corey's computer is sending requests to this website and getting some information back. And what's actually happening is that every single time that Corey types in here, Corey's computer is going to show suggestions for that search. And the way that that's happening is that, yeah, perfect. So the way that that's happening is that Corey's computer sends over a question to the server saying, what suggestions should I make for somebody who typed in squid? And so play on that. Let's see what it's great. And go to preview. And you're going to see back the response of the server gave. The server said, if you ask me for squid, here are the suggestions that you should show to that person. So not only is your computer getting like all of this stuff from something on the internet when it's initially showing this page to you, but if there's any kind of interactive dynamic stuff that is happening there, odds are that it is taking some information from you and then running that through something on the internet, and that's coming back with some response about what it should be showing on the page. And that is how this kind of dynamic content happens in front of you, rather than it just being a static page. Because like obviously the other end can't send you the list of all possible suggestions for everything that you could search for when you're initially loading the page. But what you can do is once you have started searching, it can say, okay, just send me suggestions that are relevant to what this person is actually doing.
Here's some interesting other side notes. If you look at the time for all of these, like this is 176 milliseconds. That's just over like a sixth of a second, something like that, over a quarter, an eighth of a second. And so it's a really quick response time for these things. And then that's SQI, and here's SQI again later. And they probably cached what is a good response for SQI. So the next time I got to SQI, because I deleted, it came back faster. So like there's a lot of things like that in the internet that are really clever.
Yeah. And just to give you an idea, something like 200 milliseconds is the amount of time that it takes like an electrical signal to go like once around the earth. So if you think about the fact that like, we're talking to a server that's probably like somewhere in the US, then you would expect that kind of like by the time that you think about like the time that it takes to process, you would expect something on the order of like 100 milliseconds to be the kind of time that it's going to take for things to go back and forth.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
Okay. So that completes the demos that I wanted to do, just to sort of show you what happens under the hood of what your computer is doing when you're doing things on the internet. If you want to explore more about this, there are plenty of tutorials on the internet, and we have one that is on the next slide that I specifically wanted to call out because it lets you. It's a part of a curriculum by an organization that is specifically aiming to like teach computer stuff to people that don't have a lot of experience already doing computer stuff. So it's a pretty good starter tutorial if you wanted to learn about how to make like a basic web page that shows up in your web browser, and it covers these things. It covers this information about the structure of the page and the styles of the page and some basic interactive stuff that you can do with it. Yeah,
Cool.
Great.
Replit, honestly, we use it with kids at school. It's fantastic. If you want to learn, if you want to make something, I used it on a super secret project that I can't tell you about. But if you need to spin up a web server right now, it's great. Because you don't have to physically do that.
Yeah, it takes away a lot of the infrastructure that you normally have to worry about if you wanted to like set up a web page, and so it just gets you to the point where you can like follow the tutorial without having to think about all of the sort of infrastructure and logistics of like getting it in front of you.
You can like within 30 lines of code, you can have a website hosted from the internet that other people can go visit.
Yeah, so
actually pretty amazing.
And so speaking about other people, let's talk about that in a second. So let's go to the next slide and talk about backend things. So all of these things that I said something about, you can actually do on your computer without ever sharing them. So you could take some files and some pictures and some files about style and files about like web content structure, and keep them on your computer and load them in your web browser, and you'll be able to see them and nobody else would. The moment that you get into something where you want to share stuff with other people, whether that's a very simple page that you want to be visible to other people when like they're not in front of your computer, or whether something that is very complicated that's interactive like social media, like games, that is the moment where you need something to exist somewhere in the cloud, because that is where shared information lives that other people can look at and that you can look at, but you don't have to be in the same place when you're looking at it. So the reason that we have the cloud is that when I want to run an app that you make, I don't want to come to your home every single time to be able to use it. Like that's kind of how that works.
A good example is the bucket.
Yeah,
so just like the MakeHaven transfer bucket.
Yeah.
Works great, and you can get files sent back and forth.
Yeah. Great. So what I wanted to do here is we're going to talk for a hot minute about we're going to do a demo of this server, and I'm going to do this one from my laptop.
Sure, that sounds great.
So I have 100% took somebody else's tutorial and just got it ready so I could show it to you here. So
I am stopping my share.
Great.
And you can do your share.
Take over your share. Do you have me up? We do. Great. So what I have here is I use this same site Replit that we just showed you, where you can go do a tutorial about making a front end thing. And I loaded it as a tutorial for doing the backend thing. And what this is a very, very simple game of asteroids. If you look over here, you see some code, and there's comments here because this is tutorial, and then there's more code, and it just goes forever and explains you everything about what it's doing. But we're totally not going to focus on how any of that code works. The thing that I wanted to get across is that, hey, when I run this code, and it's running over here right now, what I end up with is this very, very basic game in a web browser. And in fact, I'm gonna pop this out into a separate tab so you can see a little better. So here's what's happening. The code that is running in that tutorial is doing this. And I can hit play here, and now I have a little spaceship that is following me around, and I think I can shoot things and it can like break rocks. Okay, so what is interesting about this is that any one of you can go to this same address in your web browser right now, and you will get your own spaceship, and it's going to show up right next to mine. So if you have a laptop in front of you, you should go to this. Is this readable enough?
Share the link on Slack, yes, please.
Yeah, that's a good point. But, that's not,
I spelled it wrong.
now 5 minutes and on my window again. Great.
Got it. I'll share it on Slack.
Oh no, I got it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Great. I've got it playing right here.
Great. Hit your Corey, where's your window?
It's on my screen.
Yeah,
I can put it.
hit the play button. And now you see, okay, somebody else joins. I don't know who that is. We got 3 people now. Here we go. All right, it's happening. All right, so we got 4 people. Amazing. All right, so the reason that this is interesting is that the only way that we can have this kind of shared experience is because there is something that is sharing our information and that's coordinating this communication between our computers about which spaceship is where on the screen and where the rocks are. Because we all get the same rocks, and when one of us shoots, other people see the rocks blowing up. Because I have a magic access into this server, I have the ability to see what is happening here. So for example, over in my screen, I see information about players joining and leaving. So like very basic bit is that I get to see this behind the scenes into the server. So just like earlier, I was able to show it behind the scenes in the web page itself. Now you can see behind the scenes in what is happening in the cloud. And not only that, but I can actually pop into this and I can start messing with people. So if I say, I can say player, that's going to give me a list of players. You just need to find what's going on here. All right, so for example, I don't know who the player is with this ID, but if I go player dot list dot
You can blacklist them.
I can ask my game to tell me information about where their ship is, and I can then mess with their ship. Like, I don't know who this is, but your ship is going to get bigger right now because I'm changing its width to 2.8.
Whoa.
That was me.
Oh,
And I'm going to change the height of your ship to something less than, let's do 1.0. So you should have like a really wide and pointy ship right now. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And let me
Nice.
see if there you are. You're like at the top right there. So this is a case where I have basically access to what is happening inside the engine of this. Like I am in the clockwork for this game, and I can futz around and I can make changes inside the clockwork.
How do you see the HTML screen?
The inspector.
Yeah.
Which you're on, which browser are you in?
Oh, I'm on Chrome.
Chrome on Windows.
Function F12. F12 will do it,
Oh,
but it's Control Shift I.
okay. And while you're doing that, I'm gonna hop into mine over here.
nice.
So you can see this here. I'm looking at like what is happening in the background of this, like in my browser. Or I can look at what's happening in the background of this inside the engine that is coordinating all my computers. Corey, what are you discovering?
Just a school managed computer, often because Chrome is managed by a business, sometimes they'll turn off and on different tools. And it's very frustrating when they know to do that.
Little sign.
Sometimes they don't know to do that.
Got it.
Um,
Okay. As far as skills go, tinkering with a very basic web page, so the tutorial that we have up for the front end is something that would be reasonably accessible, partly because it's a relatively well-written tutorial, partly because it's easier to see what it is that you're doing. If you are more advanced in computer skills, you could 100% dig into this game tutorial and start modifying the game and start changing the way that the game works. But that is a much more advanced skill level. I'm happy to talk to anybody that is interested in how to do that. But we're not going to go into like sort of like how does that work. The thing that I did want to highlight is that it's very common when you're sort of peeking under the hood of the backend is to have two different tools. One is often called the console and the other is often called the shell. There's some differences between them, but both of them have the general form, I guess.
You would need to show the slides right now if you want to talk about those. They're in the slides, console and shell.
Yes, they are. The punchline is that, I won't go back to the slide in a minute, but the punchline here is that both of them have this. I'm going to show you some text that tells you something about what is happening inside the backend format, and both of them have you type text at them, and that can cause things to change on the backend. Their functionality is somewhat overlapping, and we have two different tools for two different reasons. But if you see those terms, like a server console or a server shell, like they're basically referring to text-based tools that you can use to like sneak in under the hood of a server and start messing around and changing things. The details of it are somewhat irrelevant and like way beyond what we need to try. So let me drop my share. Before I do, are there questions about any of this? No, is everybody enjoying shooting around? Yes. Okay, great. So I'm gonna stop my share. Let's go back to the slide.
Working on it. Share screen. And that one and share.
These are much kinder asteroids.
Yeah, the rocks are sure.
Yeah.
So that would be a good feature to have. So yeah, we covered that. We covered the next one, and so we can go to this is a link to the tutorial that literally we were just playing with. If you're interested in tinkering in that kind of area, happy to sort of give you more resources. And let's talk about electronics and internet. So Internet of Things is a word or phrase that we use to talk about the internet, where the device that is talking to the internet is something that is not like a full-blown computer, but it's something like a toothbrush or a refrigerator, or like there's a card reader in MakeHaven, like any kind of device that doesn't really have a full computer functionality and is just a thing, and it's connected to the internet. So that's what that means. This, like in this setting, there is still the concept of a server in the cloud that the device is talking to, and some code that is running to on the device to make that like communication happen. But it is much harder to visualize what is happening on the device and what is happening on the server. So we're not going to do a live demo unless Corey's about to surprise you.
No, I'm just getting, no, I'm probably not going to surprise you.
Great.
I just actually crashed my Chrome, so
Great, awesome. But Adafruit in there, let's make things more accessible for people just getting started kind of way, does have a website they call Adafruit.io with a lot of tutorials that basically tells you how to take something like these electronics projects that we have been working on and find ways to connect them to the internet. So for example, we could, if we have used controllers inside the useless boxes that have Wi-Fi capability, we could connect that to the internet so that like you can get like a text message every time that somebody like pushes the button on your useless box, even when you're not at home. And that would be like a very easy place to start, and then like from there, you can sort of get into more like plant moisture sensing. So like your plants would like post a picture of sadness on Instagram when like they're not getting enough water to like shame you into taking care of them.
That's a classic project, actually.
Yeah.
Twitter linked plants.
Yes. Yes, and there's a lot of,
Is that a plant DCF? Yes, I would 100% get turned in.
and I really want to emphasize that, like, because of how difficult it can be to see what's happening inside some of these internet-based things. I would not recommend that you start on an internet-enabled project until you have done a non-internet-enabled project. So if I wanted to do this kind of plant sensing, the first thing that I would do is the little plant sensor then just beeps at me. Like while I'm at home, I can hear it, but nothing on the internet before like branching out. But Adafruit does recognize that this is something that people are really interested in, so they're trying to make it much easier for people to get into it, and Adafruit IO is their way of doing that.
Yeah, basically the entire server half is handled by them. And you just need to go through the logistics of connecting to that server.
Yeah.
It is a paid service though, because you're paying for their compute time. It's very cheap, but there is a cost once you get past a certain amount of.
Yeah, it's like for like a simple project, it would be something on the ballpark of like single digits to like low double digits of dollars per month.
Yeah. Couple bucks
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's an example of if you don't want to do that, it is possible to go into full server land. This is the MakeHaven card system, that's the old one. If we go to the develop branch, there's like, it's hard for me to express how complicated this project is to you. It's a lot. It's a
I'm shocked we're even showing this, because it seems like
there's 42 different variations of this project, and it's just to sort of kind of get it to work.
yes. So anyways, on the next slide, I just have a link to a specific tutorial for getting into Adafruit IO, because they have a welcome guide, and that is the right place to start if you want to just generally get a sense of what is possible as like a starter project, and how to get into it, and they walk you through all of the steps of getting a very simple device connected. And then there's many more rabbit holes to have around this if you really want to get into it.
Yeah.
Recap and questions. So recap is when you're doing internet things, there's two parts to it. There's the front end, which stuff that happens on your computer, back end stuff that happens on servers, aka cloud. And on both sides of that, there are tools that let you see what you're doing and what's going on. The stuff that's happening on your computer, you can get through your browser inspector, either on the like content element tree side or on the network inspection side. And if you're talking to a server, you generally don't get to see what's happening inside that server, but if it's one that you made, then you do. And console and shells are a tool for doing that. And Internet of Things is a similar some code on some device and talking to some code somewhere on the internet kind of situation, except the device is not a full computer, but is something that is called an embedded device, meaning that it doesn't have all the computer capability. Is just something very basic like the use of box.
If you're super into smart home stuff, like all of that counts as IoT. So
like,
that's your jam.
Yeah, all smart home stuff is that. And if you want to get started in that, then Adafruit IO is where I would recommend. It is not the only option, but in terms of accessibility for getting started, it is the best option. The end of review. Any questions about any of this?
It's a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, and I think important to also remember that the goal is to just remember some words, maybe like if all we got out of this is the general picture of how this works, that's great. Like that's all I want,
You could build a moisture sensor in case your sump pump's bad.
Oh.
For instance.
Yes.
Yeah. That'd be a great Internet of Things project, and they do have smart home versions of those, so that they can send you a text if there's water in your basement.
Yeah,
it's a good point. I'm gonna go for those.
I recommend it.
Yeah, now that I'm a homeowner.
my apartment flooded a year and a half ago because of a burst pipe, and after that happened, I got flood sensors for my alarm. After I woke up to like an inch of like 32-degree water in my living room, that's when I decided this would be a good idea. Anyways, so I put those sensors in and they have like when they trip, they will beep. But because they are smart sensors with Internet of Things capability, smart home, blah, 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 I also hooked them up so that they will send me a message on my phone and they will turn all of my speakers up to max and start playing like at like a red alert situation and turn on all the lights in my entire apartment, so I will not sleep through another flood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
Can you just like record the sound of yourself screaming?
yeah. Yeah. Anyways, so that's it. So let's do show and tell if we got things to show or things to tell. And then we'll jump into whatever projects related rabbit holes people want to go into.